Welcome to Beyond the Page, the official podcast of Choice, the magazine of professional coaching, where we bring you amazing insights and in-depth features that you just won't find anywhere else. I'm your host, Gary Schleifer, and I'm excited to expand your learning as we dive into the latest article, have a chat with this brilliant author behind it, and uncover the learnings that are transforming the coaching world.
Hmm.
Join our vibrant community of coaching professionals as we explore groundbreaking ideas, share expert tips and techniques, and make a real difference in our clients' lives, because that's kind of what we're all about, right? This is your go-to resource for all things coaching. So let's dive in.
Hmm.
In today's episode, I'm speaking with Dr. David Drake, who's the author of an article in our latest issue, What's Hot and What's Not? What's Influencing Coaching? The article is entitled The Five Maturities, a New Paradigm for Developing Yourself as a Coach. A little bit about David. He's a PhD. He's the CEO of the Moment Institute. He's for sure know this one. He's been a pioneer in the coaching space for more than 25 years, including as founder of Narrative Coaching. He is an executive advisor for Ovida, an AI-informed platform that accelerates the development of coaching skills. Wouldn't mind hearing more about that. And founder of
Okay.
Integrative Development, a human-centered approach to learning and development that supports real change in real time. He's a
Hmm.
thought leader for the Institute of Coaching, author of the Five Maturities, a new paradigm for developing coaches. He's written 75 publications. I think you're the winner on this call, including as co-editor of SAGE, SAGE, Handbook of Coaching, and author of Narrative Coaching, the definitive guide to bringing new stories to life. David, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for writing for us.
Hmm.
I was blown away. I have to say, you really, wow, stepped way outside the box on this one.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's a bit personal because I'm on my mastery journey to what
Hmm.
National Coaching Federation calls a master certified coach, which
Mhm.
a lot of our listeners know. But you really kind of put me on my ear when I was thinking about, so what does that mean to me? Um,
Hmm.
loved it, and it really did. Like I say, it really made me think. I'm like, oh, never thought of it that way. But before we get into it, like you wrote in the article that you had done a study or a longer
Mhm.
report. So how long did that take? Tell us a little bit about how that started and why.
Well, it actually began back in the day when ICF used to host a research conference. In the end, I ended up being sort of a co-host of that. And I was sort of newer to coaching and trying to kind of figure out like who were the people I wanted to follow and learn from. And so because I was in the middle of my PhD, I decided to do an impromptu research project live at the conference. And so I found,
Impromptu. Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so I found a bunch of MCCs and people that seemed like they really knew what they were doing and interviewed them about how they got to be where they are and what they thought mastery actually meant. And out
Mhm.
of that, created this early model. I wrote a number of papers about it. A couple of years ago, I found out that a group of colleagues from the UK had written an article using that model
Oh, okay.
around yeah, to help ICF write some team coaching competencies. And so I thought, well, maybe there's some sort of juice left in that. And so I went back to explore it. And it was a fascinating adventure writing that report while I had long COVID. So with severe brain
Oh
fog.
man, yeah.
And but it actually just kept me really loose with the material. And yeah, and so for me, I've always followed a sort of non-traditional approach to coaching. And I've thought about mentors in my own life. I've thought about people I've mentored and what I've observed about coaches and coaching. And I thought, so many coaches kind of leave themselves at the door, and then I have to fit in this little box called coaching. And and they end up not only missing a lot of what's actually happening because they're trying so hard to coach because they care, right? But they're also not bringing their full self. And so I thought I wanted to write something um, that would sort of liberate people to begin to think about how could I be my best self when I'm coaching. And the last thing I'll say, I'll just a tip of the hat to Jeff Hull, the director of Institute of Coaching. So we were having drinks here in Amsterdam a couple of years ago, and he said, "You should write some more about this." And I thought, "I think I will."
And here we are, and you
And here
did.
we are. And we did.
That's
Yeah, we did.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was really had like it was wonderful to read that it's almost like you threw down a gauntlet. How's that?
Hmm.
There's a
Yeah.
challenge there to say, okay, competencies take you to here, and to the point you just made about bringing your best self for your client.
Mm.
How do we switch from those competencies to maturities? So in the
Yeah.
article, you wrote clearly about the five
Mm.
competencies and then about the five
Mm.
maturities. Can
Yeah.
you give us a little bit of a like, who do you want to see this and what impact you want it to make? And who, and there's so many questions. Like, I know I'm layering questions, I'm stacking them, but I'm so excited. Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
coach, ooh. But yeah, tell me more about what you wanted to get out of doing this and presenting it.
So part of it was I feel like the world's in trouble, and we have all these amazing coaches that I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could sort of liberate them a bit to imagine what coaching could become? I think we're still tied to a lot of things from quite a long time ago. And I think it's an opportunity for us to reimagine what our clients actually need from us now. And I realized that in developmentally, we tend to focus a lot on skills. And so there's five masteries, but each mastery needs a maturity as a grounding, a foundation for it. Otherwise, it doesn't go very well. And if you look at like watching like masters in other domains like art or music, which is one of my fascinations, I love watching expert musicians. They kind of go like up to about this intermediate space, and then a long plateau of just embodying the work till it becomes who they are. But then it's kind of a decline, not in skill or t talent, but in thinking about how they got started, and they've just absorbed all the basics. But coaches keep climbing. They keep grabbing and want more and more and more and more, which actually doesn't get you any closer to mastery. And so mastery and maturity come with a sort of surrendering to not grasping so much,
Mhm.
looking at your own life journey in particular things where you've suffered or struggled or learned some hard lessons that have made you who you are. And what allows you to do is to become a fuller, more mature human being.
Mhm.
And I believe that, particularly through AI and a variety of other things in our society now, that yes, it's good to be skilled at what we do, but what we're really going to need in the years ahead is a much deeper maturity to hold bigger, more complex spaces, deal with a lot of the polarities in society, deal with a lot of the hard choices we're going to have to make on the planet. And so for me, it's like just like breathing and just dropping into who can you become as a human being to allow yourself to walk alongside another human being in honor of the journey they're on. Worry less about is it coaching and
Mhm.
more about is it adding value to this person
Is it, are you being of service, right?
already? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It, you're okay, so I'll admit I'm kind of stuck in the competency conversation
yes,
and talking about the maturities
yeah.
and whose whose responsibility, that's the best word I can come up with. Whose responsibility is it to move to the maturities, and do we need to worry about some consistent behavior so that we don't take coaching off the rails as an industry?
So I think coaching's already off the rails as an industry because I think the word coach means so many things now.
It
So
means a
I've
handbag in some stores,
exactly. And a nice one, by the way.
right?
But so I have one of the first PhDs in coaching, and so I've thought about this for a long time. Then other people take a weekend course and call themselves a coach. Other people just call themselves a coach with no training. And so I feel like one of the things at the end of the report is an invitation to begin to think about we need more distinctions. Like for example, between coaching as an activity and coaching as a role. And so coaching as an activity anybody can bring to their life as a parent, as a leader, as a nurse. And then even within I'm a coach, like how do we make distinctions of levels and who gets to decide that? Um, and so I think there's really a huge opportunity to begin to think about how do we first off bring maturity into the conversation.
Mhm.
That would be a huge win from the report. I'm already doing some work with a couple of the big associations who, particularly around professional development, like how would we develop coaches for this? And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
starting a much earlier conversation about assessing coaches. Um, and so, like, there's an hard-earned wisdom that comes when you've been at this for a while and been really focused on your own development. And so, like the the fourth maturity is called capability. Well, competency mastery is called capability, and it goes with social maturity. It's the wisdom to know what of who I am and what I can do is relevant and timely for this coachee right now. What are they ready for right now? It doesn't matter if I've asked the world's best question, if it's irrelevant and annoying to the client.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
so and so we tend to measure people on what they've done without any sort of marking around context. And you look at, and a lot of, well, actually, almost all of coaching was built in industrialized um, white societies. So it has a very some wonderful features as a result, and also some things that don't translate as well in other contexts. And so I think as we move to more and more diversity within coaching, it behooves us to figure out what does that mean in terms of how what we understand coaching to be. And so that not only are we going to develop coaches that have a richer background, but we're going to actually be more astute in how we assess them. And so for me, I think like in my world, so I'm not accredited in any of these systems because I wouldn't fit very well. Um, but my North Star or Southern Cross for all my Aussie friends is integrity. Am
Mm,
I in integrity with myself? Am I in integrity with my agreements with my client? Am I in integrity to any agreements I've made with a client sponsor? Am I and so if I feel like I'm in integrity all across the board and I'm going to be able to use for this particular client things that fall outside the official scope of coaching, I will bring that any day. And
right.
so my first career was as a grief counselor. So I'm really quite comfortable dealing with people who are facing loss. Um, and um, yeah, and so I want to be able to bring whatever I have that's within our agreements that is of service to this other person.
Yeah, you spoke a few times about that continuous development for practitioners who work
Yeah,
across disciplines and
yeah,
network, right?
yeah,
Oh my gosh, like who do we know that doesn't? I mean, I'm a publisher and an entrepreneur before I was a coach, right?
yeah.
Well, I bring the, the more entrepreneurial side of running
Hmm.
a business and working with people, etc. And like you bring a therapeutic, a
Hmm.
trauma-informed coaching
Hmm.
side to your coaching. No,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. So you said you were talking to some of the associations. What would you like to see come out of it?
So what we just ran a 6-week program to introduce the 5 maturities to folks in our community, and then we had a whole bunch of people outside of our community. We had 85 people in that, which for us is a lot for a program that we did not
Yeah,
even market really. Um, and what I observed is that people just appreciated the place to come question their own maturity and just be in a space of not having to perform, not having to consume, just be themselves and where am I up to in my life and what do I need to pay attention to? And so the receptivity we've gotten to this, and it will evolve as I get better and better explaining it and depicting it, but people are recognizing that they themselves as coaches are having a hard time. It's overwhelming, it's distracting, it's frightening at times. looking at the world, and they want a space where they can just breathe and connect to other people. And we had a number of people, about probably a quarter to a third of our participants were new to us. They'd never done anything with us before.
Oh, impressive.
And to a person, they said, I don't even know these people. And yet the conversations we had in our breakout rooms for 40 minutes, which is, way longer than they often get, was just
Yeah.
extraordinary. Like, how did you do that? Like, what is that you guys can have this? And I said, that's the nature of, we've tried to build a maturing environment where people can come just be on the journey they're on. And I was talking to a colleague of mine who happens to be an MCC, and we were talking again, going sort of like this curve that masters go through, that when you come down to it, coaching is actually quite simple. Be quiet, pay attention, reflect what you see. Um, and oftentimes we observe that clients try too hard to do so much so they can use what they've been taught to use. But most of our clients don't need most of that. They just need somebody to see their pain or their joy or their hope or their worry or their aspiration and be with them while they try to figure out what they want to do with that. And so I'm hoping that out of this, that the coaching bodies will actually, as some of them are actually starting to do with me, begin to imagine how could we rethink what it means to be a masterful coach. Um, and then secondly, I would hope for the coaches that are listening into the podcast that you just allow yourself to be more fully human and not worry so much about having to memorize all the stuff you were taught and use all the tools you were given. And so the title of our 6 week program was called Lighten Your Load, which was like, and
Wow.
we had this visual
I
of.
feel lighter just hearing the title.
Exactly. And we had people just and they said, but we didn't actually do anything. I said, well, the point of this is not to do stuff,
Right,
right?
lighten your load, not
Exactly.
heavy your load.
And not download a tome about lightening your load, right? It just makes it worse. And but just the freedoms, like, what if I didn't have to carry all this stuff?
Yeah.
And I feel like um yes, it's important to be informed by science and research and kind of know what you're doing. Those are sort of, I look at those as givens. You
Mhm.
have to know what you're doing. But in the end, so much of around change, around progress are mysteries. I have to, and sitting in the mystery with our client who doesn't know either. Otherwise, they wouldn't
Right,
be talking to us.
exactly. Yeah.
Right? And then be with that, which requires the maturity. Like, so maturity, like, you notice that mature coach, because they're comfortable in silence. They're comfortable pausing. They're comfortable just saying a few very direct and loving words. They're at ease with themselves. They can self-regulate. They can help their clients self-regulate. Um, and they're using what they're knowing not to say, oh, I'm going to be a good coach, but I'm going to bring out this in the other person. Because
Mm.
one of the things in the report was, if all the research is right, which I do believe it is, that client and client related factors are the by far the most significant influence on outcomes, then really our only job is to mature our clients. That's
Mm.
our only job. So they can do more of this for themselves. And so, in order for us to do that, we have to be able to mature ourselves because we can't walk any farther than they have. And so, if we want to walk with them, we've got to be able to do that work for ourselves. And so, it means processing grief and losses in your life, dealing with your own shadow, dealing with your own trauma, dealing with your own selves that may or not be get in the way and or be overlooked in you. And so we've just found that I don't know how many thousands of coaches I've trained by now, but that the people that have done the best are not the smartest or fastest necessarily. They're the ones that were willing to do the work on themselves, because then the rest of it becomes really easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to use your word integrity, but I would also add
Mm.
to that, in based on what you just said, authenticity.
Hmm. Yes.
As one of the things I know that, and a gentleman wrote a book about this. So I'm gay, and
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
openly gay gives me an authenticity that even some street people don't have because they're not willing to be open about who they are and what that means and
Mm.
what their desires are, right?
Mm.
And he wrote a book called Ray Riglioso, Gay Men and the New Way Forward. And he kind of said, so who wouldn't want an openly gay coach because they've done the work on themselves? It's something to
Yeah.
come out and to, know what to say, what to do, when to be out, when not, like a lot of work on yourself just in that one realm. So
Sure.
that's why I would add in authenticity
Hmm.
to it. And the MCC coaches, especially the ones on my editorial board, well, all of them actually have exactly what you're talking about. I
Yes.
so I sometimes I think our editorial board call is more for me about just being amongst that
Mm.
maturity. And I thank you
Mhm.
because that's a word different than wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Wisdom is up here, and I feel
Yeah.
maturity is more of a holistic thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the five maturities, where each one is sort of related to a particular aspect of becoming better at what we do. And so it's just meant not as a map of the entire coaching universe, but to say, when you're in a moment with a client that's maybe not going so well, or you're reflecting on a session, or even when you've had an argument with your loved one at home, right? Which of your maturities could have used some attention in that moment in time?
Mhm. Well, and
And
our
yeah,
listeners, I'd love for them to subscribe and get the
yeah,
article, etc. But I just want to remind them that the maturities are personal, which relates to the competency of capacity,
yeah,
spiritual, which relates is the foundation for clarity, professional, which is the foundation for competency, but of
hmm,
course, that's one of five.
yeah,
Social maturity, which is the foundation for capability, and contextual being the foundation for credibility. So, to your
yeah,
point about working on your maturities,
yeah,
there's like, okay, where does this one fit in, and how does it
yeah,
relate to the competencies, the five? Because it's not just it's yeah, your turn. I just
yeah,
get so excited reading this one. It's like it
yeah.
really puts us a bit on, it's like it puts us on notice that
Yes,
competencies are not the answer.
no, not at all. I mean, the thing I tell my students, if I'm training new chefs, I want to know that they know what end of a knife to hold,
Yeah.
right? And there's basics, right?
Yeah.
But I think, but advancing as a coach is just not more competency.
Right.
Matter of fact, if you look at like all the painters that we admire, the masters of painting, they all broke new ground. They created new genres of painting. They
Mhm.
sort of flipped off the establishment, and you know, uh, um, and so they actually broke all the rules once they had learned them, right? So you think about when you force people too much into a competency model, it would be like giving Van Gogh a paint by numbers kit for his birthday.
Great.
Yeah,
Because we want to know that he can fit within the box and
yeah,
therefore keep this particular standard for
yeah,
coaching. And I get that at the beginning, like I'm a
yeah,
PCC.
totally.
But my question is, what's beyond MCC? But maybe it's not even what's beyond MCC, it's what's from PCC forward. MCC is
Yes,
just the competency of the maturities that I need to work on.
yes,
But
yeah,
working on the other ones would be more
yeah.
equally as important, if not more.
Yeah, and so you think about like in my work with Ovida, one of the things we're working on right now is sort of a new generation of the platform using a lot of my work around how do you help people actually change behaviors.
Mhm.
And so as part of that, let's imagine you get some feedback from one of your sessions. You watch the video on Ovida, and both the AI and maybe your mentor coach or both point out, hey, there's a really short gap between when the client stops talking and you start talking. I wonder what it'd be like for you to pause longer, give them some more space, let it land in the room, and really, before you leap in, really get a feel for what is this? Um, and so let's imagine I gave you that feedback because I'd watched you coach. I'm sure it's not true for you, but imagine it was. And you're like, oh, great. One more thing I've got to remember. Like, I don't know why I don't pause. Yeah. And so most people don't really understand how do I get better by becoming more aware of myself. And
Mm.
so one of the things we're doing on the platform is we're taking some of these core skills, and they've worked with ICF on this as well, and say, let's take pausing, for example. It's one of my favorites. Um, so what are the things that a masterful coach does that allows them to pause that a beginner doesn't? Well, one of the things we can anchor on is their breathing. So if I want to help somebody like that's eager and excited and wants to be helpful and they leap right in, I might just say to them, I'd like you to practice. I'm going to talk and then stop. And then when I stop talking, I would like you to exhale.
I knew already what you were going to say, but I've just broke the exhale.
Because what I've automatically gained you 5 or 7 seconds where you can't talk. And in that 5 or 7 seconds, if you're even remotely aware, you'll recognize, oh, I don't really need to talk right now. Oh, I could just wait. Oh. And so just by getting you to pause, where your body's already saying, oh, we must be needing to relax right now because he's not breathing. So everything must be fine. And so now we have one of the pillars that goes into pausing.
Mm,
And then we might work on their mindset and we might work on their self-regulation energetically. We might work on what do they think is their role at that point in time. And then all of these little micro skills add up to naturally learning how to pause. As
mm.
opposed to, I'm going to a class on pausing. No, you don't need a class on pausing. It's just more
No.
stuff.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Makes
You
sense.
know, that really speaks to something that I've been hearing a lot
Hmm.
from our writers and our interviewees, and that is that that a lot of people don't have a path for their self-development. First of
Mm.
all, they feel that the next thing is a certificate, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And what you're implying, and I'm buying into 100%, is working on self, bringing
Yes.
self to there to, and in service of the client, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And so like for me at this stage, and for actually for quite some time, I don't go to coaching programs. I don't even go to coaching conferences that much unless I'm speaking or seeing old friends. And I said that because that's not the domain where I'm going to get my next level of development. And so I might go and study Feldenkrais, or now I'm doing this deep dive again on Taoism. And it's really giving me some new language about how I've always coached, but giving me now some disciplines about how to get even better at that. And so my invitation to your listeners is you can download the paper from our website at the Moment Institute, but look at the maturities and say, where would I like to begin? Don't try to tackle all five. Just pick one
Yeah.
and say, just pick one. And then and coaches again, we tend to overcomplicate things. And so we tell our students, but you just pick one thing with your client, just one. Even that's going to be big for them. But with the maturities, pick one you think might speak to where you'd like to go next in your life or your career, and really just look at that within yourself. And
Mm.
what could you do? What do you already have in your library, among your friend group, your coaching groups, whatever, that would help you deepen your maturity in that way, in that space?
Okay.
And
So I'm gonna
because
I'm gonna I'm gonna
yeah,
ask you about one then.
what's that?
I'm gonna ask you about one for myself.
Okay.
Give a good example for our listeners. And I'll tell you afterwards why I'm picking this one, but spiritual maturity.
Mm,
So what does that mean to you? Like what should that mean to me as a maturity?
yeah. So it's not necessarily spirituality with a capital S. In the beginning, I called that relational maturity, but then it didn't feel quite big enough. It is for me from an indigenous perspective, but for most of us in the West, it's too limited to like romantic relationships or whatever.
Right.
So spiritual for me is it has to do with our cosmology, our philosophy, kind of how do we orient ourselves in the world? How do we tend to, what lenses are we looking through the world? And so it has a lot to do with our capacity to see.
Mm.
And the more we can see, the more we have available to us as a palette of colors to work within a coaching session. And when coaches are trying really hard to coach, they're missing most of what's actually happening in the session because they're only because we our the stories we're telling ourselves completely shape what we see. And so one of the ways that people can like one of the exercises we do, and I'll give a shout out to Heather Plett, a fellow Canadian who came to one of our events in Toronto many, many years ago. And Heather went on to do some extraordinary work in holding space. And she wrote a beautiful parable for the narrative coaching book about park benches, which was her experience at the workshop I did. And so one of the things that we do is invite people just to go for a walk in a park near you and sit on the bench and watch people. And without judgment, without frames, without anything, just watch them how they move, how they talk, what their energy is like, and you realize there's 1,000 ways to live, right?
Yeah.
10,000 ways to live. And so you start to realize all blind spots, things you don't even see, or things you judge and therefore don't look at, the assumptions and heritages you have that you unconsciously project onto your clients. Well, they must want that too. In reality, they probably don't. Um, and so it's the ability to be fully present and completely non-attached because we're not caught up in our stories about who we think they are, who they should be. And so we can see them for all of they are from their worldview, not from ours. Yeah.
Wow. Just put that in the framework in the conversation about coaching,
Yeah.
right? The maturities, working with the maturities, working on self, and coming to a coaching call like sitting on a park bench,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
It should,
Wow.
yeah, it should feel just like that. And so we want the client to leave with a lighter load as well. And we want them to feel like they've been in a wonderful and beautiful human conversation.
Yeah.
And there's a great quote that we adapt a bit, but every client comes with an innate healer in themselves. And our
Mm.
job is to activate that so they
Wow.
can heal themselves.
Wow.
And so again, my biggest soapbox in this place, there's many to choose from, but it may be my biggest is I just invite coaches, please stop coaching. Please just stop. Just be quiet for a minute and breathe and notice what's actually happening to this beautiful human in front of you. And if there comes a time when something you know about coaching could help them, great. But they're to think I'm coaching them as you've already like I'm going down this road.
Right. Yeah.
When yeah,
And you're also creating a level of like I know something you don't, and
yes,
like a power dynamic. And
exactly.
I'm working a lot on and a shout out to Janet Harvey. I think she was the one
Mm,
that pointed this out to me about like constantly bringing yourself to the level of where your client's at, and in fact, what like walk truly walking with the client and seeing what they see.
yeah, and we've all been taught that for years and for decades, but it's harder than it looks. I mean, it really is. But it comes back to it's not hard to do. It's hard to grow ourselves so that we can do that.
Mhm.
Because yeah, and so yeah, we just want to encourage people to um, just focus on what needs to mature here in myself as the coach, in them, in our relationship, um, and that will allow us to have um, a greater ability for the client to do new things.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
well said. I would love to end on that point and ask you,
Okay.
what would you like our audience to do as a result of the article in this conversation? One thing you mentioned was to look at the full report at
Hmm.
momentinstitute dot,
Calm.
there we go, and themomentinstitute.com.
Yeah.
And what else? Is there anything else you'd like them to do other than, of course, read the article and
Yeah.
pick a maturity? I have.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've got a retreat coming up in January where we're going to take a deep dive around your own journey in life to actually walk you through some of our practices that help you with each of the five maturities to get you started, and then invite you to pick others that work for you.
And
And
we
then you
can
find
find out about your retreats at themomentinstitute.com.
we can. They're called the Guiding Lights Retreat, and it's sort of bringing back what I did live around the world. I think in 23 countries
Mm.
at one point, and we're doing them again now virtually, and hopefully in time we'll do them live again. But for now, we'll do them virtually, and um, yeah, and I just feel like like I said before, where we need to become better humans, and I think in some ways, coaching is not kept up
Mhm.
with who many of us have become. And what we're needing now is something that better coaches have done for a long time. And I think I hadn't thought of it this way, so I appreciate this, Gary. But part of the value of the five maturities is mastery is not a destination, neither is maturity. It's a lifelong journey, right? You're
Right.
always in some way or another. But through the five maturities, now, if you're a newer coach or a younger coach, you think, how would I ever get there? Yeah, there'll be education, there'll be, feedback, there'll be supervision, there'll be whatever, but ultimately it's about what can you do to develop yourself, um, and to be able to kind of move into spaces that would allow you to really grow yourself. Um, and for me, that I think is where we're all being called to go right now.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. And thank you lots of gratitude for you
Yeah.
writing the article and for being with us here today to expand a bit more on it. What's the best way for people to reach you?
If there's a form on our website, you can reach me there, or you can just reach me at david@themomentinstitute.com.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and I'm always looking for projects where people are interested in embedding the five maturities and but really starting these dialogues. And I think if enough coaches start asking for more, then other players in the game might have to offer them more.
Well, I
Um,
point them your way as I talk to
yeah,
them. And I
yeah,
talk to a lot of them, especially for writing and
yeah.
interviewing, things like that. So and so wait for the end of my sign off today. I think you'll like it. So
Okay.
I want to thank you again for joining us for this Beyond the Page episode. An absolute delight. That's it for this episode of Beyond the Page. For more episodes, subscribe via your favorite podcast app, which probably brought you here to this one. If you're not a subscriber to Choice Magazine, you can sign up for a free digital issue by scanning the QR code in the top right corner or by going to choice-online.com and clicking the Sign Up Now button. Now, wait for it, David. I'm Gary Schleifer. Enjoy the journey of mastery.
All right.